Hi folks, Florida Man here. Today it is my pleasure to bring you an after-action report on a diplomacy game I played as Italy. I played this game on Play Diplomacy in fall and winter 2020, concluding in December. It was called Open Game. I took over the surrendered Italian position in spring 1903 when the map looked like this. My predecessor had committed me to a war with France based on the early position, and an alliance with an Austria who was noticeably stronger than I was. I was particularly uncomfortable with the fact that the previous player had given up control of the Ionian Sea to Austria, of all things. Despite the fact that Austria had, as far as I was concerned, no justifiable reason for needing to occupy that space. Austria also had a total of 3 fleets, giving him greater naval power than I had. So my first diplomatic task was talking to Austria, sussing out Austria's intentions, conveying my nervousness about the fleet sitting right off my coasts in the Ionian Sea, and the army sitting in Tyrolia. And Austria responds to this by reassuring me that those units are moving east to attack Turkey or sitting there to assist Germany, respectively. I was weaker than Austria in any case at this point, so I felt I had to take Austria's word here and just negotiate to continue our friendship into the future. Another factor was that I didn't want to lose my momentum relative to France. Austria proposed sending a fleet west at some point in the future as well, and I accepted that proposal since Austria had too many fleets to be able to park them anywhere conveniently anyway. It wasn't something I was happy about, so you will see me take the initiative to shift the balance of power here when I have the opportunity to do so. On the bright side, France had moved into the Ruhr last year, and England had put a unit in the Irish Sea, so the map looked set for Germany, England, and I to dogpile France, and I was well positioned to ensure I gained Marseille and Spain at least. I developed good relations with England quickly. I didn't hear from Germany, which I think frankly just reflects less investment in the game on Germany's part. And Germany makes some significant mistakes going forward. I also never heard from France in this game. In spring, you see I succeed in advancing against France, mostly because France tried to pull its units into a defensive curl and focus on fighting Germany more than me. I think basically the whole French set of orders this season was a mistake. France should have pulled back from Germany and tried to make an alliance with the German player against England, and France needed to try to keep a unit in Marseille, as well as a unit next to Marseille, to defend it, whose support could not be easily cut. Instead, because of France's orders here, I could have walked into both Spain and Gulf of Lyon in a single season. France loses mid-Atlantic Ocean, which was entirely outside of French control, but the fact that the French army in Ruhr was destroyed by Germany was within French control, because France moved into Burgundy, cutting off that unit's only possible retreat. On my end, Austria keeps to the word given earlier about withdrawing from the Ionian Sea, but makes a move I would normally consider provocative, shifting a fleet into the Adriatic Sea, instead of moving to Albania, which would have served the same purpose without threatening Venice. However, in fall 1903, I don't actually complain about the Austrian move, because I figure the purpose of a unit there right now is going to be to move west, and since it's going through the Ionian anyway, my most vulnerable area, there's no point in me getting upset. Sure enough, that unit does go into the Ionian Sea. At the same time, my moves ensure that I will be able to adequately defend my home centers and Tunis from any possible attack by that single Austrian fleet. In the build phase, I get a new fleet, and Austria gets 2 armies in Vienna and Budapest, which makes Austria relatively less threatening to me than if Austria had built in Trieste. Spring 1904, I bounce with England as we each try to take the mid-Atlantic Ocean. When England asks me about it, suggesting I should focus on Austria, I tell England that I need space if I'm to turn and confront Austria, and we agree to DMZ the mid-Atlantic. Meanwhile, Austria makes our prearranged move into the Tyrrhenian Sea. Austria is rolling over Russia in the east as well, and that fact, coupled with successful negotiations with England, convinces me that this is the moment to betray my Austrian ally. In fall 1904, Austria moves into West Mediterranean at my request, taking that fleet out of immediate position to harm me on its own, and meaning it can't support anything that Austria might do. And Austria continues to advance against Russia. I seize my first Austrian center, Trieste, and I walk into the all-important Ionian Sea. England asks me about my battle plans after this, and I give an exaggerated account of the challenges I'm going to face fighting Austria, urging England to open up a front with Austria in northern Russia to assist me instead of immediately going after Germany, which I thought England was otherwise inclined to do. England has shown a respect for Austrian military prowess thus far, and England continues to respect Austria's strength here, promising to fight Austria in the north and prevent further gains in Russia or Germany for Austria. In the build phase, I get an army and a fleet, enabling me to potentially retain Trieste while making gains in the southern Mediterranean region. Austria prudently builds an army in Budapest. In spring 1905, Austria finally reacts to the stab with messages. Austria's messages are conciliatory, both dangling the possibility that we could take over Europe together, and pointing out the asymmetry of our forces, that Austria is much stronger than me. I respond meekly that, although I do not believe I can defeat Austria on my own, I felt it was necessary to tackle the power that looked like it was clearly becoming a solo threat. There's a mix of sincerity and exaggeration here. I've carefully assessed Austrian strength, and I think if I can disarm Austria with my words here, I could actually become strong enough to defeat them on my own. Late in the season, Austria messages me offering to let me have Greece if I'll vacate Trieste. Unfortunately, it was so late that I didn't see the message or respond to it until the fall, resulting in me moving as if Austria hadn't messaged me at all. At the same time, Germany makes moves against England rather than worrying at all about Austria, judging correctly that Austria will probably be preoccupied with me in Russia for a bit longer. Early in fall, I message Austria stating that I hadn't seen the spring message until orders processed, but I propose to work with Austria and vacate Trieste nevertheless. I also provide a set of orders that I'm not at all interested in putting in, which would have renewed the alliance between Austria and myself. Unfortunately for Austria, Austria believed me, which resulted in me keeping Trieste and gaining 2 more Austrian centers in addition to the Greek center I was already occupying. This is my last verbal contact with Austria, but that's okay, because at this point, I believe I'm finally strong enough to beat Austria in a straight fight. In the build phase, I get a new army, and Austria makes the mistake of destroying the fleet in Tyrrhenian Sea, which frankly could have kept 3 of my units occupied defending against it. This gives me clear naval superiority over Austria. Even with my fleet in Spain, it probably stuck there, keeping England honest. I think the 1905 orders and builds were frankly the turning point in the game here, from being Austria's game to lose to being increasingly favorable toward me. And Austria probably should have destroyed one of those units near Russia instead. Those units were not all needed to hold Austria's ground against Russia, and they were too distant from me to be instantly useful. I used spring 1906 as a repositioning season, trying to get more of my units onto the front with Austria. Happily, since Austria destroyed a unit close to me rather than one that was far away, Austria has to do basically the same thing. In fall, I lose Trieste, but simultaneously I improve my positioning again, taking the Aegean Sea and moving into a position where I can threaten the Turkish centers. Despite losing a center, I get to build another fleet this year as well because I had been forced to waive a build previously. Spring 1907, England moves into mid-Atlantic Ocean, a move they discussed with me beforehand, and which became safer for them because I had vacated Spain last season to defend Marseille from possible German attack. They unfortunately need the unit to fight Germany, because the war between the two of them has been terribly inconclusive. At the same time, I retake Trieste, and I begin to fight Austria for control of Constantinople. Fall 1907. I'm convinced that Austria began to give up on the game, because Austria chose to vacate Budapest, an inexplicably bad tactical call that had no justification that I could understand. Frankly, looking back, I still don't really get the decision. This allowed me to force Vienna, and thereby gain 2 builds rather than 1. I also moved back into Spain, since Marseille was not under immediate threat, and to make sure England didn't sneak in. In the build phase, I get 2 more armies. Spring 1908, England and I agree to make Iberia a DMZ area, and I return that fleet to Marseille. Of course, at this point, I'm just waiting for a good moment to violate this agreement and sneak back over there to take Portugal. England has continued to have trouble with Germany and has not even taken St. Petersburg, so I'm fairly confident that I'll be able to violate the DMZ agreement before England has the freedom to do so. In the east, I take Budapest and Smyrna, and I lose Vienna, and that unit naturally retreats to Trieste. Fall 1908, I lose Bulgaria, but capture Constantinople. I'm pleased because even though I'm losing almost as much as I'm gaining in terms of sheer numbers, my positioning is improving each season. In the build phase, I get an army. Spring 1909 sees me convoy it into Greece and sneak into Munich, which was something I found more humorous than anything else. Austria continues to be in the position of fighting a 2-front war with Russia, even though Russia is now only a single unit. Fall 1909, I again take Vienna and Austria retakes Budapest, But this time I also reclaim Bulgaria, so I will again have a build, while Austria will have a destroy. I also sneak a fleet into the Tyrrhenian Sea in a move that will mark the beginning of my push west. It's at this point I would say the whole board takes notice of me as a solo threat. In the build phase I get an army and a fleet, because Austria will keep a few of my fleets pinned down in the Turkish space for some years to come, and I'll need both of those units if I'm going to keep advancing. Spring 1910, I retake Budapest and succeed in sneaking into Berlin, which is one of those things that should never ever happen for Italy in a million years, and it only occurs here because Germany and England are still fighting, even with me in Munich. At the same time, England moves into position to defend Portugal against me. In retrospect, I made my ambition to capture it too obvious a season too soon. Fall 1910, I take up a very strong defensive position in the western side of the Mediterranean, while holding on to Berlin and capturing Romania. The unfortunate reality here, though, is that I knew Berlin would be indefensible as soon as I took it, and now everyone has moved into position to fight me, so I know Berlin will be my first loss. With the build phase, I get 2 more armies and another fleet. In a gesture of reconciliation, Germany destroys the fleet that Germany had put in the English Channel. Now everyone is truly focused on defeating me, which is the most ominous development in this game since I successfully stabbed Austria. In spring 1911, I position to defend Munich, but otherwise my moves are all either shuffling units around or bouncing. On the bright side, I delay my opponents getting a hold of either Mid-Atlantic Ocean or Silesia, which would be the key spaces for them to hold in any stalemate line. In the fall, I message England, congratulating them on holding out against me so well. They take Mid-Atlantic Ocean at last this season, while Germany forces me out of Berlin as I had expected, but I retreat into Silesia, and the fact that Germany has a fleet in Berlin instead of an army looks positive for me as well. England and I agree in principle that a draw might be inevitable at this point, although I must admit I'm hoping here to play on English ambitions to still find my way into the solo. As long as Sevastopol and Ankara and Moscow and Warsaw are all potential targets for me, which they currently are, it's still possible for me to solo. And in spring 1912, the decisive events occur that give me the win. It's no great diplomatic or strategic coup on my part, rather, England decides not to give everyone coordinated orders this season. England had apparently been leading the Stop the Solo Alliance, but the English player decided he didn't want to be the only one doing all the work, and therefore England just issued defensive orders for his own units and waited to see if anyone else would propose anything. Since no one did, no defensive efforts actually happened, and instead Germany actually abandoned their position along the front line with me in order to stab England. Perhaps Germany anticipated that England's silence meant a stab was incoming, but in any case, this season is fatal to their alliance. And England, who is now fed up, decides to help me into the solo in the fall. With English support, I achieve an unlikely victory by taking Warsaw and Berlin, of all things. If my opponents had been working together at all, it should have been impossible for me to ever hold Berlin, let alone to finish the game with it. Conversely, I'm amazed Austria held out as long as they did in Ankara and Sevastopol. If the game had continued, I would have taken Moscow and thus dismantled Austria's defensive lines, but the Austrian did a great job of maintaining that defense for as long as they did. England also did a great job of coordinating the Stop the Solo Alliance for as long as he did. Germany did a great job of making sure I'd solo, Russia did a great job surviving, and I like to think I did a great job of not ruining my relationships with any of the people we played with, which was nice, because the real prize in diplomacy is all the people we got away with stabbing along the way. Anyway, after a prolonged struggle, the game ended in an Italian solo victory, probably the most satisfactory resolution possible for all concerned. I had fun, although the ending was slightly anticlimactic since it didn't come from my pure diplomatic or military prowess, but was instead handed to me to a degree. But a win is a win. I hope you liked this commentary, all. My videos will hopefully not slow down too much in this new year we're in now. I'm trying hard to keep to my pattern over the last several months of regular weekly content, although I have a larger workload with my new job than anything I've had in previous positions I held. If you want to support the channel and encourage continued growth, the best ways you can do that are by liking, subscribing, commenting, and sharing my videos with others. I'm always especially happy to read comments by people who find my videos entertaining or inspiring, especially by those who take what they hear in my videos and actually start playing diplomacy for the first time or start adapting their strategies and tactics based on new ideas they hear about. Let's make 2021 a great year for the diplomacy community. Until next time, Florida Man out.